recording. Oh, we should be recording now. Let me do a quick round of introductions, and then we can start talking here. So I'm Jim Gunther, and I am the chapter director for Startup Grind here in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I have got the fortune today of being able to have Sam and Nate from Captured Sun to talk about their company and their early stage startup. And I actually met both of them through a conversation with Sam's father, and we started talking about Startup Grind Global. And one thing led to another that you all attended Startup Grind Global. And I always love to hear feedback about it. I found at the times that I've been to the Global, I didn't make it this year, unfortunately, and I'm still mad at myself. But I found that the times that I've gone, I've been to a lot of conferences and meetings across the globe. And I find Startup Grind to be one of the most dynamic and just most fun. You never know who you're going to run into, and the people are just so dynamic. Everybody's just driven, and so it's one of those experiences that I love to share with people. Um, with that introduction, just a couple things. I'll be posting a couple parts in the chat here in a couple of minutes. But if anybody that's on here right now would like to post their information in the chat, Startup Grind is really about making global connections. And what I mean by global connections is making global friends. I have a lot of people I've met through Startup Grind that I consider really good friends. And I, always put it out there that if you're going to be in New Orleans for a meeting or a conference or something like that, please tell me. And at the very least, if our schedules won't do anything else, we can get a cup of coffee. So it's one of those things. You have a friend in pretty much every city, and so it's a really neat thing there. So with that introduction, again, I want to introduce Sam and Nate here. And they're with the new company that they founded together, Captured Sun. And I think the best thing to do is start off and tell me about Captured Sun. Give me your 3-minute pitch that for Captured Sun.
Sure. So 3 years ago, I quit my economics major at Rice University, and I learned how to code in a boot camp. And it was 9 to 5. And during that time, I just started having all of these ideas about how the computer works and how it could be different, and how internet things and local things could be connected into the same interface. And I wondered why it wasn't this way. But I was new to the industry, new to the space. I had never thought about this stuff before. And so I had no idea if my ideas were good or not. But over time, I got a degree in computer science. I worked professionally as a software engineer. And it turned out that some of these ideas, most of these ideas, were actually really good and they were pretty correct. And so about 8 months ago, I had the opportunity, after finishing up some work at USAA, to decide what I wanted to do next. And I figured that I should give these ideas a real shot of changing the computer and changing the computer desktop and the whole interface and everything about it. And so that's where Captured Sun came from. The name I just thought of, in 3,000 years, like 3,000 years ago, what would make sense? Like, what is a computer really when you think about it? Like, how would you explain a computer to a tribesman in a jungle? And Captured Sun really stood out to me as something that would stand the test of time. So that's why I chose it. And Nate can say how he joined also.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll give you a little background. I'd say my entrepreneurial journey started 2.5 years ago. I was graduating college at the time, and I was on a business track, so I went to a pretty traditional finance job right out of college. But it was about that time where I started thinking of what kind of, I guess, impact I would want to have on the world. sort of following not just like a career path, but kind of going on my own life path to look at the things that I was interested in and take a critical look at the world and see what problems like needed to be fixed. And when I started thinking of that mindset, from there it kind of developed into, well, I see all these problems, right, in the space that I'm personally interested, which was tech at the time. And I guess the next stage was actually having the confidence of looking like beyond the horizon and seeing like I can actually make a change. Um, and I guess that's what kind of led me to start talking with Sam. It was about that time where he was coming up with the idea of Parchment. And when he pitched it to me, the more I listened to it, the more I thought about the idea of restructuring and reshaping the operating system under the paradigm of what we see today with all these productivity apps. That's what got me really, really excited. And that's basically where I pivoted and left my job to come help him out. So.
Interesting. You left your job for this. Okay. These are the kind of questions I love because I always wonder where that tipping point is of saying, okay, this is calling me, and they say that being an entrepreneur is kind of a manic depressive world. That one day, yeah, everybody can agree with this. That one day you're on top of the world, and the next day you're going, oh, what am I going to do now? And so I always kind of come back to that of what was that, was there an event that you went through that you sat there and said, okay, I'm done working for somebody else. I want to move on and I want to try this. I think I've got an idea in my head and it's just burning to get out. And so I guess the first question is, was there an event like that for either or both of you all? And if you don't mind, like talking a little bit about it, I'd love to know. But some people have, they've told me I've always been an entrepreneur from when I was a kid. I started, my own lemonade stand. So what's your story there?
Yeah. So for me, I've never really considered myself to be an entrepreneur. I don't even really consider that to be my identity now. I more consider myself to be a creator. I've always wanted to create things. Like I make music also. I've written books. And I just really enjoy doing stuff like that, creating something from front to back, visual, artistic, but also like structurally sound, good engineering. And so as far as like deciding that I didn't want to work for somebody else, I mean, I did have some of those experiences just based on working as an engineer. And there were times when it felt like they were just saying, like stay in your lane. Like we only want you to solve engineering problems, but we don't want you to think about design. We don't want you to think about anything that's outside of your lane. And so that was unfortunate for me. But really, I mean, to be honest, I really was enjoying my job right before I started Captured Sun. I was having a great time at USA. I started working on Parchment more initially, actually, to impress a girl. And once I found myself out of the company, I was like, okay, well, it's probably about time. I might as well give the idea a try.
Yeah, I'd say my whole life I've kind of had a pattern of tinkering with things, kind of peeling back the layers with certain, whether it be like tech products I was interested in, or even looking at creators that I like listening to. So kind of following from that mindset, I would say um, it put me in a good spot to, after when I graduated college, to take a look at my life from a third person view and see like I have the um, I guess skill sets, if you would, and the field of finance is kind of hard to make an impact like it is in the world of tech.
Mm-hmm.
The job I was at the time was a stockbroker for Charles Schwab. So it was a very like narrow lane, like Sam said. There wasn't really a lot of wiggle room to really explore like what your true skill sets were. So I think all those events kind of led up to it's pretty good timing. I mean, we're in our early 20s right now, and everyone's saying take risks, right? Because that's what I think the last stage is where most people fail at, right? You go from looking at the world around you and seeing those problems, seeing the opportunity, and then actually believing that you can take action, and then from there, um, most people take action, but when people fail, they give up, and that's the stage I think me and Sam are at right now. It's like we just have to keep. Well, now I guess like we're starting to take action, right? And like anything, you're gonna fail a couple times before you succeed. So that's I guess that's kind of the mindset we're in right now.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that come to me with different ideas for companies, and and I'll sit there and say, about they say like 1 out of 10 is gonna make it.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
is a good idea, and then there's all sorts of reasons why ideas fail, but at the same time, even failed ideas will give you some really great knowledge and feedback if you use it right, and you say, okay, this is what happened. I'm taking from this experience when I move on. So it does. So I know exactly what you mean there. So I got a question, I guess, to start off, leading back into Captured Sun. You've mentioned Parchment and Captured Sun a few times. So for our audience, can you kind of distinguish what those two are, and go in a little bit more about Captured Sun itself and what the platform is? So in other words, I know it's a desktop reimagined, but can you give us a little bit more about what you're thinking about there?
Yeah, so yeah, should have explained that earlier. But Captured Sun is to Parchment as Microsoft is to Windows. So Captured Sun is the company um, based on tech. It doesn't have to be Parchment, but Parchment is what we're focused on right now. It's our flagship product. And Parchment is the next computer desktop. It's a reinvention of the computer desktop by basically combining the three main layers of abstraction on the computer that people use: the file system, the browser, and notes applications or page based applications such as Notion or ClickUp into one interface and sort of compressing them. The easiest way to explain the motivation is one space for one idea. Really, just like a true mind map for your real world ideas instead of a box that you open up and you have to navigate to a million different platforms where one idea is scattered completely across them.
I see. And so a little bit about your development phase. So where are you, right now in the whole process, and can you kind of lead me through your steps in the process here and what you've kind of gone through, because I think that story in itself is going to be really interesting.
Sure, yeah. We can share our screen here.
I think I can get you to share screen for a bit if you'd like. Let's see. Can you do it directly? There should be it. Yep.
See this? Okay, great.
Cool.
So yeah, Parchment is in what I would call stage one right now, which is that it's an individual application on the computer that you can download. And so basically the way that it works currently is that you download it and it opens up a tab in your browser with the name of your computer as the URL. And what you will see here when it opens up the first time is the home directory of your computer. So the one that has your name on it, the one that has documents and downloads and everything, just giving you a home, really. I mean, a command central for everything on the computer. And so, as far as the journey, when Parchment started, it was just a blank page, and really all you could do was just make some shapes and drag them around and maybe write some text. But eventually we evolved it by making it connecting it to the file system. That was the first step, mapping the URL. Like if you notice, the URL is one-to-one with the folders on your computer. And then we made them see-through, so like you can see everything. You could even like drag something out of a folder / space if you want to drag it back in. Really just trying to dial up the interactivity of all the different layers. And then since then, we've just been trying to make it as useful as possible. So like small things like being able to drag a link in straight away from the bookmarks bar, or being able to like paste a link into a text box, or things like that. Yeah.
For the next, we want to integrate the sharing feature. So right now we're in a folder that sits on your local desktop, but because it's being represented in the browser, if I had my computer, I would be able to collaborate in real time on this space, just like you would be able to do
Yeah,
in a Google Doc.
so this space that I'm in right now is actually not this computer's home directory. It's my other computer, my old computer, which is sitting in the garage right now. So all that stuff you saw me do with the file system wasn't this computer's file system. It was the other one.
I see. And so the concept, you could do this like I could log into any computer from anywhere in the world, and I would have my desktop per se, or Parchment available for me to, and when I write and put information on that desktop, even if I'm in another part of the world, it's going to write back to my computer, correct? As long as they're both connected to the internet.
Yes.
Right. Think of it like a SharePoint for all of your devices, or if you're in a company, I guess for your whole team. But it goes much deeper than pretty much all the products out there, because no product is touching the local file system like what we're doing. I mean, we're all familiar with, if you want to get a local file into an environment, into a workspace, you got to click upload, you got to search and dig through the file system. But that was one of the big pain points that we're solving here, because it's all right there, automatically imported. All of your ideas are mapped out in a visual canvas to where you can just start adding more without having to switch environments, switch tabs, switch windows, and stuff like that.
How about things like if so I use for my work a lot of specialty programs like data analysis programs. So how would that integrate into Parchment?
Do you have any specific use cases? Like, what do you use these programs for?
So like I'll do data analysis in MATLAB, or I'll do, in the past I've done like chromatography analysis using specialized programs from various companies. So these could be graphing programs. These could be, again, they're specialty programs, but would they just directly integrate as almost a folder on your desktop that way, or how do you envision that? I know that's probably further along than you are right now, but what are you thinking there?
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the business owners that we were partnering with, his first comment was that Parchment reminded him of his Power BI dashboard. I think that's what it was called, for like analytics, right? And so I think there is a real value of being able to sort of have this home base that you go to every time. The real value of it is that, for instance, any community of people who use something like MATLAB or any app like that can build any sort of plugin really easily to integrate that with anything else on here. And so it's kind of like each one of these spaces, right, is a website. And so you can do a lot of things with that if you get creative with it. Like, for instance, if you don't want to use the MATLAB interface for like importing files, or if you want to do it in a certain way, or if you want to have the graphs outputted in a certain way, right? Anybody can make a plugin to do that. Anybody can make a plugin to integrate that into Parchment and show you those graphs in the way that you want. Maybe even generate a graph every day, right? Automated. When you wake up in the morning, you see it there on your dashboard. We can't know all the possibilities, but there are so many because it is just HTML and JavaScript. So it's really, really accessible for anyone to make an extension or a plugin for.
And I am 100% sure that a lot of the AI software that's coming out now, and things like, again, Chat GPT, that's going to be able to, that you're going to be able to integrate components of that into this to basically set automations into it. So again, I'm a big fan of, there's a ton of software out there that's doing that independently now, but being able to integrate that into something that encompasses like your entire desktop is going to be a really big feature, I think, in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, ChatGPT is really fluent with HTML and internet languages, obviously, for obvious reasons. So when your computer sort of becomes a mind map of like a big topography of all of those elements, if you put the AI onto that, you can do crazy things, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing we've noticed with the whole AI craze is it's really taken the idea of an interface and abstracted it down to a single text box where you put in input, you get immediate output. So the next step from that would be, what kind of environment could we use an AI in to give you insights on your proprietary data that you already have, whether it be sitting on your computer or in your company's like internal data. And so we think like a little bit further down the road, that would be like a pretty big opportunity for us to integrate.
Gotcha. And I was gonna let's see if I can. Can you unshare your screen? I don't, unless you need it again.
No, we're good.
There we go. Good. Yeah. I wanted, because again, I'm recording this, so we are going to put this up on the YouTube site for Startup Grind. So how about digging into this a little bit deeper? So y'all are, creators, entrepreneurs, creators. I actually really do agree with your statement there about being a creator, because I've looked at a lot of positions that I've worked at over the years, and one of the things that's always come to mind for me is I hate being just a cog in the system. And I love that balance of having, the ability to explore a little bit and to play with an idea and see where it takes things. And again, that is the stuff that interests me, because that's where the new ideas come from. So with that, how about experiences here? So far in the creation or entrepreneurship side, I'm going to ask for best experience so far, something that you were just walking on cloud nine, and worst experience so far, because this typically happens a lot, and I think everybody can relate to this.
What would you say?
Yeah, you got to think a little bit about that. I'd say the best experience was just getting to meet all the entrepreneurs that we met in Palo Alto at startupgrind, because where we're based out of right now, there's not a lot of people in the tech space. And
so you're San Antonio, right? I just want to put that in for everybody in the audience. Yes.
Right. So like when we went there, we went to a pre-event dinner with like 10 other founders, and it's probably one of the best like dinners in that like sort of context I've ever had, just because we were all sharing our ideas. You could just feel the energy in the air, and it was something I haven't really felt before. So I'd say that was one of the best experience I've had in most recent memory.
Yeah, when you're around other people that are driven, and it's just infectious. It really is. I've been in situations before where you're around people that have no drive to them, and then it's painful sometimes to be around. When you're in a situation where the people around you don't have any drive, and then when you go to those types of meetings where you interact with people that you can just tell that when you talk to them that passion for what they're doing and the excitement just comes out. That's really magical. It shows you, that this is the way it's supposed to be, and it's hard to operate at that level all the time, and that's why it's so important to have a really good network with other people that have gone through these things because again there's a lot of downs in this. The ups are great, but the downs are kind of rough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I had a really good time at Startup Grind. Um, I think because it was just such a good outlet for us, because it felt really good to have a platform. That's what it really came down to. So, I believe in the ideas fully, and so like when we had that platform, um, I was just completely dialed in, refining the pitch, refining every single thing about what we were going to do for that moment. And that was a really good feeling. And it was just really fun meeting everybody as well.
Yeah, it really is the Startup Grind Global Conference is really incredible. They really have something magical. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Um, the first time I went, I like I said, I've been to conferences all over, and this one was one of the ones that I came back and I was just so energized. It just there was so many people there that had great ideas that you just kept thinking about the whole time, like on the plane home, even weeks afterwards.
Right.
So yeah, um, any any great advice from the Startup Grind Global? Like was there one person or one piece of advice, maybe a quote or just a sentence that somebody said there that just stuck in your mind?
Well, I talked to Ivan Zhao, actually, the CEO of Notion, which was definitely a highlight for a lot of reasons, because a lot of investors came up to us the day after. um, but he did tell us about some of his early technical struggles, because that's what I asked him about, because we were using the same technology that he actually started Notion with. Coincidentally, we have similar thinking in that way. And so I naturally wanted to know why he abandoned it, in case there's anything we should be concerned about. And it turned out there's not really. But what was interesting was that he really emphasized the one idea of building your thing on top of something stable, on top of building your crazy stuff on top of something really established, a really established platform. Because he was saying like he was trying to build on top of this platform, which was also new. And so he couldn't tell whether the problems were coming from him or from them. And it was creating a lot of chaos. So he was really emphasizing, do crazy stuff, but pick a stable platform and then build on top of that. And that's really stuck with me because I think it might be true.
Yeah, it sounds like good advice. Yeah, and again, I know nothing about the programming field there, but just in general, it does sound like a pretty good piece of advice there. Um, so I guess circling back to this, how about any of the like days or what was a time that you just sat there and said, okay, I'm on the verge of giving up here? Has there been anything like that, or obviously you haven't, but everybody I think goes through this.
Yeah, I think everyone definitely goes through it, whether they admit it or not. But I think our moment came back in January of this year. I mean, we were just starting out. We were both pretty naive, thinking like we had a really um, well, it is a revolutionary idea, but we thought we were one of the only people in the space that were kind of touching on this idea. And I remember one night we discovered the Arc browser company and kind of what they were doing, and that was kind of our first uh, introduction to like a direct competitor from what we saw. So obviously, it kind of shook us in our boots a little bit because they're way farther along than we are right now. And I remember we stayed up pretty late into the night, like basically getting our website up and running, kind of feeling like it was all collapse again. Like we had to do all this, and this to like catch up with them, just because that was like the first competitor that we directly like found out about. But yeah,
Yeah, it was a positive motivator, I would say.
Yeah.
Because, I have been saying this stuff for so long. We're going to make the internet computer the 21st century computer desktop, and nobody else was saying it. But then I found somebody who was saying it, and it was like, he didn't take it from us. It was just one of those things, like two people in two different places had the same idea. And so, this other person happened to have $20 million and 50 people working on the idea. And so it really motivated us, but I think the motivation helped us in the long run. I mean, I think it motivated me to start talking to the CEO of Brave Browser and try to explore, what we could do there. So, yeah, that was I do remember that though. It was a significant experience.
Yeah, oftentimes the things that when you first encounter them like that, you go, "Oh no, this is really bad." They turn out to be kind of some of the better things for your company's growth.
Yeah,
They either help to push you in new directions, or they help to give you kind of new insight, or at the very least, that it's a good idea because somebody else is doing this.
right.
And a lot of times, the question comes up, is this a good idea or not? And a lot of founders will sit there and say, oh, well, this is a good idea. And you'll go, well, how do you know it's a good idea? And they'll say, well, I like it. I think it's great. And it's like, well, that doesn't really tell you all that much. It's a single person, single event, and it's your idea. And so when you start seeing things like that, it also validates that you've got a good idea, and that this is something interesting that people are going to be interested in. So there's a positive side to those things a lot of times.
Yeah,
So
I agree. It definitely was valuable in some way because, I mean, I have no experience in the tech industry basically. I just learned how to code a couple of years ago. So, it seems like a good idea, but maybe I'm crazy. But when I saw this guy saying the same stuff, it was like, okay, like I was right. I was even more right than I knew. Um, and at the same time, it was a little bit comforting because he was only focused on the browser, but we're focused on the desktop. So we have a little bit of a bigger vision too.
right, and one of the things I've noticed about this is that there also may open up room for collaborations on things. You
Yeah.
never know. There's a lot of times. So my old one of my old bosses used to always hate networking, and they would tell me, "Oh, networking, it's it's just network. Nobody really does that, or you know." Um, and what I've come to find is that networking opens up a lot of places for you to look at your skill sets, and to open up new ideas and collaborations to build really novel concepts. So I always think about this as being like puzzles, and like I'm really bad at solving like a jigsaw puzzle or a Rubik's cube, but I consider myself really pretty good at being able to talk with people and remember their skill sets, their background, their knowledge. And it might not be instantaneous, but it might be a year later or 2 years later that something will come up, and I'll say, I know just the right person that can do this and enhance this idea. And so that's one of the really neat things that I found in doing a lot of the networking that comes along with this type of work. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I know one of the things you all are doing is you're looking at raising capital right now. And so to kind of switch gears a little bit with you on that, um, how do you I guess so give me an idea about how do you determine just overall like the amount of capital that you think you're going to need, and then how are you going about raising capital for your idea? What's your main focuses there? They always say that you start off with the friends, fools, and family for raising capital, and then depending on where you're going, there's other directions. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your experiences there so far, because every startup founder needs to understand how to look at their burn rate on capital and how they're going to raise capital for their idea.
Yeah, so we did start with friends and family, as most people do. Shout out to Caleb Nilsson, actually, who's in this call. He was one of our first investors. But yeah, as far as how we determine how much, it's kind of a slippery slope because we want to build an operating system. So, like hypothetically, I'd love to have 40 million, but nobody's going to give me 40 million. So for me, it's more just like setting milestones. Like for instance, I think that we could have 50,000 users in 6 months, and then we could do that if we had $500,000. And so that is a real milestone that we set and a real ask that we made to an investor. But recently we've been asking for like 1 to 2 million. Um, just because it would be really nice to go ahead and get into the browser space. Because I personally think a browser is easier to sell than an app that runs in the browser. But we'll see.
Yeah, as far as picking out the investors, we've heard all these stories of people who reach out to like 1,000 investors, some crazy number like that. But what we found is we want to find people that are highly aligned or interested in this specific niche that we're in. I think that's the most important part for
Yeah.
new founders, people starting a company.
Mhm.
That's pretty much the strategy we've taken. We've looked at companies similar to us that are still ongoing or have even failed so far. We just reach out to their investors, and most of the time we get pretty far with them, and we've had a lot of success without having to reach out to hundreds or even thousands of investors. So
Yeah, that's my best advice. I mean, as someone who hasn't gotten a lot of investment yet, but we've had a hugely better hit rate
Yeah.
on the investors that we find, like based on our products to us, rather than just investors, people that have money.
No, I think that's a really good piece of advice there, and I can add a little bit to that because I do, or I did in the past, I still do in a couple of different manners, but I've done a lot of grant writing for different types of developments, everything from educational grants all the way to business grants, and finding the right fit for those grants is the exact same thing you're talking about as finding the right fit for an investor. And I've had a bunch of people tell me in the grant field, and I'll tell you that I think that this is a real horrible way to approach things. But I've had a lot of people tell me in the grant writing field, well, we're just going to put a general, grant out there. And then for all of these different agencies, we're just going to, change the title and send the same grant in because, and I've had people actually say, because, oh, well, nobody reads them anyway. And I've been on grant panel before. Yes, you do read the grants, and yes, you do make sure that they're aligned with your interest of that the request for proposals. And so the same thing there. If you're, going after an investor that is not, or really has nothing to do with that space that you're in, it's a bad fit all around. Because your investors, and in fact, I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience here. But I've always considered your investors, whether they're friends, fools, and family, or if it's angel investors, or if it's venture capital, that it's not just a money component, but you're tapping into their experience, and it's not that you again. Some people think that investments just, well, give me X amount of dollars and go away, and that's not what I see on the really successful people that I've talked with. That they tell me that it's a lot more of an interaction there. In fact, I've run into investment companies, venture capital companies, that when they tell me that when they're going to look at a company, they look at the founders of the company, and they ask always the question: are the founders capable of their vision? You may have a great vision, but are you the person to execute that, and convincing them that? And so a lot of times I've had them tell me that they go through all of your social media posts, and they'll sit down because they want to know who they're investing in.
Yeah.
They want to know you, and I think that's a really important part of that. Can y'all have any insight on that for us?
I agree. I mean, I've stalked Instagram of potential investors, so it goes both ways.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we learned when we talked to our very first angel investor. Um, he was through a mutual friend, but he told us, like, I really love y'all as people, and I think y'all are capable, but I'm just not in this space. And for me to come on board would mean I'd have to become an expert just like y'all. He used to make nuclear power plants back in his day, which is so far removed from what we're doing. But yeah, that was probably the first insight we got from talking to someone.
Yeah, the execution thing is interesting because someone did just tell us that. And I kind of wasn't expecting it, I guess, because it's only been brought up like, I think like once or twice to us actually. But it is a good point that they probably are thinking that in the back of their head every time. So that experience, when they actually mentioned it, made me realize like, oh yeah, like this guy doesn't know me. He doesn't know that I can do this, or like why I can do this, right? It's an interest. I haven't really solved the problem of like how to express that without coming off as like overly egotistical. I'm not really sure. So advice.
I don't know either there. In fact, if anybody in the chat has any suggestions on this, or actually, I was going to open up if anybody in the chat has any questions to ask, because we're coming up on the last 10 minutes of our meeting here, and so I'd love to get any questions in from the participants that are on today. If you'd like to know anything, like I said, it's really amazing that we've got people from all over the world on today, and I invite people to connect with each other afterwards during the meeting. You never know where these connections are going to go. I've run into people at conferences and meetings before that'll sit there and say, "Oh well, I'll have my people connect with you afterwards," or something like that. And I always find that to be kind of like, it's discounting you. And the truth of the matter is that you never know where these things are gonna go, and so you always should treat each person that you're interacting with as that next potential, that something really great might come out of this. And I've ran into people that were so far out of my field that I sat there and said, I don't know, it sounds nice, but I don't even know what you're talking about.
Sure.
But the truth is, 6 months later, I run into somebody else that's the perfect piece to complement what they were doing. And so you never really know there. And I don't know how to, convince, I don't know the perfect way to convince an investor that, you really are the person to accomplish these goals in that, especially in that 60-second pitch or that 3-minute pitch. How long? I know you pitched at Startup Grind Global. How long was the pitch for you all there? Was it 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
The official one was 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Yes.
Yeah, that was intense. That was what I was practicing. I probably practiced it too much, but I
No.
really, really compressed a lot of information into those seconds.
Yeah. I truly believe you cannot over practice. I've had people say, "Oh, well, it's over polished or over practiced," and I think personally that's bad advice.
Hmm.
I don't think that you can when I practice pitches or presentations, I will, especially the short ones like that. The short ones are harder than the long ones by far. And people think, a lot of times, oh, I got an hour presentation. How am I going to handle this? Our presentation is a lot of times easier than a 60-second presentation because, 60-second presentation, you're at 60 seconds on the nose and you have to get your point across. It just becomes much harder. And you end up like I end up practicing those things 20 times at least.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I practiced it a lot more than that. I was just riding around on my bike, like saying it to myself for a long
Yeah.
time.
A lot of people say, and I've done this before, like getting a mirror and practice in front of the mirror. I'll sit there and I'll practice running through my slides, and a lot of times I'll say, oh, this slide doesn't make any sense now when I'm speaking about it. It sounded great when I put the slide and the presentation together, but now this doesn't make any sense at all. I've got to redo this. And so, getting the feel for that, and then also again, knowing your audience is such a critical thing. Your presentation is going to be different, depending on who you're giving it to. Oh, let's see. Scott just posted here. The better, more professional the pitch, the greater confidence it gives potential partners and VCs that you're the right person to launch the idea. I can't agree
Yeah.
with you more. The more polished that you sound, it's like I said. I one of my first presentations, I had somebody say, "Oh, well, it sounded like you were too polished," and I just thought that was the strangest advice that I had ever gotten in my life. So I truly don't believe in the idea of being too polished at it.
Yeah.
I years ago I got to watch a pitch give me a second, IndieBio out of San Francisco for biotech startups, and I was visiting there, and they had a VC or a potential investor come in and just did a kind of walk in surprise visit, and immediately they had the businesses that they were there, and they were like, okay, pitch. And I mean, it's like you've got to be ready to, again, think about it like you don't know who you're going to walk into in an elevator, and you've got to be ready to have that pitch, and ready to go with it. And so practicing it is what makes that difference there. It's like any other kind of athlete that when you practice these things, it makes it a lot better. It makes it a lot smoother. So,
Another piece of advice that I have for people real quick is that I never wrote my pitch down. And I think it really helped me. My pitch has never been translated into like the written word. And because it was only 60 seconds, I mean, anyone can do that. I think it really made it memorable for me because it always came from the heart every time. I was just saying, and if I was saying what I felt, and if it wasn't good, then I would just do it again until it was right. And I remembered what was good and what wasn't.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I never, like I know some people that'll have extensive notes and they'll just kind of read from their notes for their pitch. And again, I find that to be kind of strange that, if it's your idea, you know, even if you've got to have it as a constrained time frame, I think that reading it off of a notepad or something like that, it really detracts from it. If you got to have bullet points on your slide, then hey, have bullet points on your slide to remind you on what you've got to say at time X, Y, and Z. But yeah, I agree with you there. I don't ever write down a full pitch either.
Yeah.
So we got about 3 minutes left. Any final advice? How about, let me ask you this question. For next year, you planning on going to Startup Global again?
Yeah, probably.
Any advice for somebody thinking about it, or anything like that? Or any more advice in general? I'll take either.
I think something you actually told us right before we went, and one of our mentors did, Tom Malott, who's one of the co-founders of Menlo Innovations, is just go to every event that you can go to. Because during the conference, there's like that 2-day stretch where you're at the booth. But apart from that, there's so many like after events, like dinners, and it's all about taking as much of that opportunity as you can. Because like you said, you never know who you're going to talk to, and we pretty much experienced that with every event we went to. We'd be talking to someone and find out, they were the head of, like, the CFO of this really big company out of Europe, and we would just be it would just be a lot of that. But I'd say that's the biggest piece of advice for people thinking about going.
Yeah. Actually, it's one of my favorite things. Steve Blank says almost the exact same thing in one of his meetings. And he says true entrepreneurs, they tell you that they're lucky, but the truth is that they make their own luck. And they make their own luck because they show up more than other people do. When everybody else says it's too much trouble to go to that event, they're the ones that are going there, and they make those connections. And over time, you build your own luck. And I truly do believe that as a great way of looking at things.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? One of the investors that I connected with the most at Startup Grind, I connected with him because I asked him if I could set my computer down next to him. I didn't know who he was or that he was an investor, but we just started talking, and it eventually became something. He gave me his card. So yeah, anything can happen, but you just have to put yourself in there and then go for it.
Great advice, you all. I know we've got to wrap up now. Again, thank you and everybody else on the call today. Please, if you want to connect afterwards, I know a lot of people have been putting their information in the session chat there. I don't know. You can copy and paste, I think, everything in the session chat if you'd like. But definitely, it's been a great experience today to get to talk with you all about this, and wish you all the best of luck with your company. If you last question, are you looking for beta testers yet on your new stuff?
Yes, very soon, probably in a month or so, we'll be ready for that.
Okay, so if anybody's on the call today and interested in that, please reach out to them.
Yeah, you can sign up on our email list on our website, parchment.page. Can you put it in the chat? Yeah, and you can find us on pretty much all social media, also Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn.
I know I've got your company link in the bio there, so it should be everything should be in the bio section there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you can sign up on that, then you'll get notified if we release the beta.
Gotcha. All right, everybody. Well, again, thank you so much for the time today, and we'll be looking forward to hearing all the great things that you've got coming out with this.
For sure.
Yeah,
Thank you
looking
for
forward
having
to it.
us.
Oh, did it end?